This is one of my favorite paintings to recreate, the snowman in the snow. We start by taping down our watercolor paper and creating a snowbank, which is just a piece of masking tape that has been split. Make sure that you don't tape down too much. In this case, we are taking a piece of tape to create our snowman, and we're making it into a square. I've found that by taking a square and cutting the corners off of the square, rather than trying to recreate a complete circle, is a much easier way of creating a cylindrical or a circular design. So we have our first circle. It's rough. We're going to create a second one that's not quite as big. Again, you take the square and cut the corners off of it and continue around until you get a circular design with the tape. Be careful not to press down too hard with your tape. In fact, use a very light touch because you do not want to have to take this tape off if it is very stuck to the paper after the paper gets wet. So there's our snowman in tape. Now we are going to create a tree. And this was just a leftover piece of tape that I had originally and two smaller strips of tape. I'm cutting off some extra parts of it so that it looks more even. And there we have our tree. Now, this process is the easiest. We take straight water and we paint over everything, including the tree, the snowman. This should only take you 20 seconds to actually paint. We're going to start by painting straight blue lines, 5 of them, on our page. Make sure that it is up and down. Straight purple lines, 5 of them, on our page. 4 brown lines. And finally, 4 black lines. It's okay to allow some of the white to show through. Now, at this point, you may find that it's very, very wet. Here's how you fix this. You take your paper towel, you dry it off, you simply pick up what you can with your paintbrush. Continue to dry your paintbrush off. Notice that I'm not painting over top of everything again. Every time I pick up any paint with a paintbrush, I dry it off again. So this just allows me to have a quicker dry time for my paint. We do have to allow our paint to dry for a few minutes before it actually can be worked on. So I've let this dry for about 10 minutes. I'm taking the tape off of the picture. Notice that some of the paint does seep through underneath. That's okay. And if you happen to have a piece of tape that gets stuck and tries to tear the paper away, please be very careful about it and take your time. I've taken all the tape off. I'm taking the excess tape here and taping it on the bottom so it gives me more room to work. The next thing we're going to do is outline our tree in blue, straight blue, and we are going to do something called bleeding. Bleeding means that you just simply take your watercolor brush, rinse it out, and barely touch over top of the blue that was originally there. It will react like a magnet and create a sort of fuzzy area that will give it an actual look of a shadow. So by rinsing out your brush and very carefully allowing that to overlap some of the area that's there, notice how my colors kind of bleed to the side a little bit and look fuzzy. Be careful with this because it does have a tendency to want to bleed into other areas. So make sure your background is fully dry before you start this. I'm going to create shadows from my tree and my snowman. Notice that they extend to the left because all of our highlights, our light is to the right. And you'll notice that I did not surround my snowman and my tree in shadows. I wanted to only have it on one side. I'm adding a little bit of a tree in the background because I don't have a lot of color in this except for the browns and the blues. So a little green tree in the background always makes for an interesting focal point. I'm adding branches to my tree. Again, with branches, make sure that they're always going up and out, off the top of the paper, off the sides of the paper. Never have them hanging down. And with birch trees, we always want to make sure that we have a random layer of lines. You do not want to make a pattern with them. I'm also going in and painting the excess little dots on my snowman that represent his eyes and his mouth and his buttons. You'll notice that some of my dots are actually bleeding because they did not, the blue did not dry completely. And this happens occasionally. I can always go back in and fix this later. I'm taking red and making a top hat and a scarf. And I'm going to get a little bit of orange and put a little line for the nose. Less is more when it comes to watercolor. With this section, I'm going to show you exactly how to make a little bird. This cardinal is going to be a simple dot for the head, a teardrop shape for the body, and we are going to do a small line that kind of angles up. It's almost like a very narrow triangle. Now, we also want to create the beak and the comb of the bird. When we put this on our painting, we want to make sure we have a very light touch. Use your smallest brush. Take your time with it. Otherwise, you'll end up looking like you have a squirrel or something else on your picture. And here we have our final product.